This is the Living Vertizontal podcast, brought to you by The Church at Riverstone, a fellowship of the Church of the Nazarene in Madera, California. We are a podcast that discusses the intersection of Scripture and our lives. Together, we continue the conversation that was started each preceding Sunday morning in our worship gathering.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick.
And I'm Natasha.
And we are the Living Vertizontal podcast with you this week as we continue our journey through Lent together. Last week, for the fourth week of Lent, we worked through Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 11 through 20. And in this passage, we heard some of Moses' final words to the people of Israel as they prepared to enter the promised land. Remember, Moses wasn't going to be entering, so this was kind of his final message to them, right? The last words that he could possibly think to say and the important things. And together we talked about the choice that we are presented with each and every moment of every day. We can either choose life or choose death. This was the choice that Moses set before the Israelites in this passage. As we choose life, we grow in love for God. We listen to his voice and we hold fast to him. We become a reflection of the kingdom of heaven. Now, as we move into this fifth week of Lent, we are going to be turning back to a psalm, looking at Psalm 27 of David, a psalm of confidence, of crying out and trust amidst uncertainty. Natasha will be reading for us today, but before we have her read, kind of like last week, we think that it might be important for us to just introduce some things up front. That way it can help inform, I guess, the hearing of the word and what it might be saying. And so one of the things off the top is, I said this was amidst uncertainty, and we're even uncertain about what the uncertainty is. So within the psalm, we hear David say something along the lines of, I'm surrounded by my enemies. And the truth is there's really no clear understanding of who this enemy is that is surrounding David. There's a myriad of possibilities. Really, it's almost like it's an endless amount of possibilities. When I did some research into it, it brought up, well, this could have been the enemy of, King Saul when Saul was pursuing David. It could have been the enemy of Absalom, his son, when his son turned on him and tried to, subvert the kingdom from David. And then it could have been any of the other conflicts that David encountered throughout his reign. And so this could be other militaries of some sort from foreign lands. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what this enemy that is pressing in around them is, what this chaos is.
So kind of we don't really have a good grasp on what elicited him to write this psalm. However, it seems like once it was written, it was something he probably could have prayed or sung
a lot
over and over and over. Yeah.
Right. And I think that kind of leads into ultimately why maybe it's a good thing that there's no specificity to who his enemy is. Because the truth is, if this psalm was written specifically in response to like the conflict between him and Saul, we could easily write it off as, well, I'm not in the midst of a conflict with like a father figure of mine. Or likewise, if it was in the midst of the conflict with Absalom, we could be like, well, I'm not having this issue where my son is trying to kill me, so this psalm doesn't really apply. I can't really level with what David is feeling here. Again, likewise, if it was any one of the militaries that, or the surrounding countries that came against him to have this military conflict, like we might say something like, well, I'm not in the military. I'm not in the midst of a military conflict, so this also doesn't apply to me. But when we can step back and there's this ambiguity of what this chaos is specifically representative of, we can say, oh, there's a little more space now, much like you did. Like David could have prayed this psalm a whole lot throughout his life. And the truth is, so can we. So with that, like as Natasha is reading the psalm, yes, it is David's words. Yes, it's in response to something David is facing, but maybe it would be good for us to try to stop for a second and envision or recognize what is some chaos that maybe is surrounding us right now. and then have that kind of chaos mentally pictured as we hear this prayer from David read by Natasha.
Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besieged me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I might dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At his sacred tent I will sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice when I call, Lord. Be merciful to me and answer me. My heart says of you, seek his face. Your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, God my Savior. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Do not turn me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, spouting malicious accusations. I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord.
All right. Thank you for reading that for us today, Natasha. And really thank you for praying that over us as we are hopefully each envisioning maybe some of that chaos that we might be encountering in our lives today. As we move into this conversation on this psalm, I think I want to just identify maybe a structural piece of it, something that really stuck out to me as I was reading through it the first time, because I was initially taken by knowing that this is a psalm in reference, or a prayer in response to being surrounded by an enemy. I was struck by David's confidence in the beginning, right? Verse 1, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Well, I'll be honest with you. When I'm seeing chaos around me, my instinct is not to say, I have God. Who shall I fear? I become overwhelmingly focused on the chaos, and the fear does start to creep in. And maybe fear is an imperfect word to use there, because other things maybe creep in, other negative emotions, but there are negative emotions that begin to creep in when the chaos presses in around me. And so I was immediately taken by his confidence. But so then I kind of start reading the rest of the psalm, and I began to recognize, or I think I recognized, that there was like these three main pieces. So there's this confidence in who God is at the beginning, and then it moves into this crying out to God, and maybe even still a confidence in the fact that God is going to hear, that God is going to listen. But so there's a confidence in who God is, a crying out and confidence that God is going to listen, going to hear, going to respond. And then at the end, there's this confident trust, this confidence in what God will accomplish, right? Again, that God will respond. So I guess, even though I initially said there's like these three distinct things, they are kind of distinct, but they're kind of united by this confidence that David has in who God is, what God is like, and how God responds. And this can only happen out of a really deep and rooted relationship that David must have with God. Because without a relationship, it's going to be very difficult to be confident in who somebody is. It's going to be very difficult to be confident that somebody's going to respond. It's going to be very difficult to be confident in what that somebody is going to do as the chaos unfolds. But we see here in an overarching theme throughout this psalm, this confidence that David has in God.
Yeah. And, I think we can contrast this a little bit. So with the kids this week, we actually focused on the psalm in part, but also on the story of Zacchaeus from Luke.
The wee little man.
Yes. And so, Zacchaeus doesn't come with this same approach to when he approaches Jesus. It's not one of confidence because he doesn't know, right? He's heard these things about, and so his is more an exploratory, but he is driven, he's compelled to get to a place to see Jesus. He wants to be in his presence. He wants to have this relationship essentially that David is
or at least
describing
seek it and see what it's like
here. Yeah. And so he's got to check this out. We know the story, right? He's too short to see over the crowds. And so he climbs up into this tree so that he can see Jesus.
Right.
So he seeks him out with everything he can muster. He seeks Jesus out. And in so doing, he ends up getting involved in this relationship with Jesus because Jesus says, hey, I want to come and stay with you, right? And so at that first encounter, that confidence may not necessarily be there. It might be more of a curiosity and might more fall out of desperation from the chaos, right? I'm sure there was a lot of social chaos for Zacchaeus, given that he was a tax collector, rejected by most of his own people, probably largely by his family. He was the enemy. And so his social world is in chaos, even if his financial world is pretty well stabilized. And so he's desperate for relationship. And that drives him to this place of interacting with Jesus where he, even coming with this different set of circumstances, finds this rest and this relationship in Jesus.
Yeah. And I mean, so bring that then into the Psalm today and where that might fit or how that might fit. It kind of comes in the middle in this request that David has. That was another thing that was talked about around our table on Sunday morning. One of the members of our group was just like, I was really struck by the fact that David makes this statement in verse 4 where
I only want one thing.
Yeah, one thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek. And she was like, so then, okay, if he's only asking one thing, what's
is
this
the one wish?
I mean, yeah, three wish genie, right? And you're always like, okay, what are the three things that I'm going to ask for?
But
you only get one. Yeah, you get one. And the one thing that he asks for is not riches, it's not fame, it's not even deliverance from this enemy that is surrounding him.
It's not wisdom.
It's not wisdom. All it is, and I say all it is, but it's pretty incredible. It's a request to dwell in the presence of the Lord. It is a request to abide. It's a desire to abide. So the one thing that David asks for in the midst of all the chaos is to simply abide with God. Much like Zacchaeus. Circumstances are different, maybe not confidence, maybe a curiosity, maybe desperation, whatever, but the desire is the same thing. There's this desire to abide, to be with, and to find that rest and that peace there.
Yeah, and Jesus really celebrates this with Zacchaeus. I mean, he looks up at Zacchaeus and he sees him. And he says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. And so many people receive this request. Everyone, we believe, receives this request from God. Hey, I want to come and abide with you. Yeah. I want to come and stay with you. Won't you open your doors to me? Won't you allow me to stay in your life? Won't you abide with me? And so many people are more like the crowds. They want to see who this Jesus is. They want to see what he's up to.
Maybe they want to be kind of near in proximity, but
they're not ready to abide, to dwell.
Yeah. So, as I think about that, I think it makes me wonder, like, okay, so what would keep somebody from wanting to abide? What does it look like to abide, or what would keep somebody from wanting to abide or just kind of be present with God? And I think for me, it comes down to maybe a fear, maybe a desire for control, maybe an unwillingness to surrender or to submit. Maybe you're comfortable where you're at, and so you're not exactly. Again, there's uncertainty in what it's going to cost to abide. with Jesus. And so I think the thing that is often keeping us really is all of these uncertainties that we may have, and maybe a comfortability that we have with our station. Not that there's not chaos around us, but it's like, okay, in a way I can manage this. I don't necessarily need to dip my foot in something else that might open other doors. I want to go back though really fast to something that you said also about, you said, and Jesus makes this invitation to each and every single one of us. Like the invitation where he looks at Zacchaeus and he says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. But then obviously we have a decision in what we're going to respond. So on that topic, there was another piece of the psalm that really stuck out to me that I think fits this truth, that Jesus does speak and reach out to each one of us, that God throughout the Old Testament was reaching out and speaking to the people and desiring to be with them. So it was verse 8, my heart says of you, seek his face. And then my response, your face, Lord, I will seek. So it's like there's this dialogue even that David acknowledges that in his prayer, in his time with God, there is this invitation that God has issued where he says, seek my face, come and abide, come be with me. And David's commitment is, your face, Lord, I will seek. I will be with you. I will pursue you. I will follow you wherever you might go. And so I think that's a really important call out that you made as we were talking through that, about this idea that Jesus does invite every single one of us.
Yeah. And, ultimately, this is what he desires from us from the very beginning of creation, right? He created humanity so that he could be in relationship with them. And he so desperately desires to abide with us. And so as we seek him for his safety, for his security, for his peace, for his comfort, for his love, for his faithfulness, for all of these things that he is so overjoyed to have us sit in his presence because he really desires to have relationship. Everything that he is working together as he works to build his kingdom here, as he sent Jesus as a sacrifice, all of these things are working toward restoring his relationship with humanity. Mm-hmm. And so he wants that so desperately. And when we say yes, man, it's a party. There's so much celebration and beauty and excitement that surrounds our acceptance of his invitation to abide.
Yeah, and I think the acceptance of this invitation to abide really does change everything also for us in the midst of the chaos. Around our table, one of the questions that I asked was, when you're facing chaos, what's your typical response? And then the follow-on question, when everybody kind of shared, this is how things look, was, okay, how might it look different if your response was similar to David's response here in Psalm 27? Like where he intentionally, instead of honing in on the chaos around him and then trying to deliberately begin to address it, he turns to God and focuses on him first. What would it look like? And even though like the specific answers maybe varied a little bit, the overwhelming consensus at our table was, if we were to respond the way that David does here, with ultimately a confidence in God and a request to, or a cry out to abide, it impacts the way that we then respond in the midst of that chaos. We no longer do it the way that we had just confessed. This is how we often respond in chaos, because the truth is, a lot of us around the table were admitting, oftentimes when chaos ensues, I'm not looking to Jesus first. The chaos gets distracting and a little overwhelming, and I forget to focus on him. I forget about his invitation to abide, and so then I just don't even abide with him. I don't give him that first focus.
Yeah. And, we are in this journey of Lent, and just coming off the 5th Sunday of Lent. And, this whole season really is designed to help the church kind of remember this practice of abiding, this practice of being dependent on God, the practice of dwelling with him and journeying with him in every aspect of our lives. I mean, this is really what dependence looks like, right? This is what abiding looks like, is walking with God moment by moment, taking the chaotic situations to God first before I try to solve them. Taking the moments where I feel overwhelmed to God, even though that seems so counterintuitive because I don't have time to take them to God. I need to act now. But how could I act now when God is the thing that sustains, when God is the thing that's going to give me the wisdom and the strength and the discipline and the patience to be able to overcome this situation or any situation that comes my way. And I think that this is such an important reminder always, but also in particular in this season of Lent, as we remember we are dependent on God and we want to make that space to abide with him. And that when things get crazy, when our lives feel like they're going to chaos, that we remember that we were built for relationship, right? And that apart from God, our life gets a whole lot more chaotic than it needs to be. And if we would just rest and not try to carry the things we were never meant to carry alone, but to allow God to help us through with those things, we would experience such great peace and such great joy because we're dwelling in his presence.
Yeah. This season of Lent is often associated with a fasting, right? Fasting from certain foods, fasting from certain things that we do. A lot of people, social media. And the fasting really is about creating that space to expand the areas where we can abide with him. It's like it's creating space for that time to hang out. It's creating margin. That's another word that we've used in the past, where it's like, instead of filling things end to end, or which essentially then make us self-reliant, self-dependent, we create margin so that way we can see the areas that we can depend on God. For me, like, this is a very personal thing and has everything to do with Lent because of what it resulted in, but has nothing to do with Lent because this was something that I've been dealing with for over a year now. But I've been having these health issues that have drastically changed the life that I used to live. It has changed everything I can eat, basically. It has changed the activities that I can participate in. It has changed the level of stress that I'm able to respond to in any given moment. And it has done it in such a drastic way that it's almost like it was a forced fast from all of those things. Literally, where I was just sitting on a couch eating very little because my body couldn't handle it, and doing very little. And it was like an invitation where Jesus was just like, hey, abide with me. You see, that food that you have been craving, you were so like dependent on that. You loved food. I mean, I did. I love food. But I recognized that I had almost placed this food in in a spot that it didn't need to be, because I had become dependent on, oh man, I'm going to really enjoy eating this, and I'm going to really enjoy eating this. And it was made to be something that it wasn't. I needed to recognize my dependence on God in the midst of it. I had stopped I had taken for granted the things that I would eat. I would just eat anything and everything, and I wouldn't recognize, oh, this is a beautiful gift from God. Same with my physical state, like being able to lift things up. Very rarely was there something that physically I would have to ask somebody else to help me with. And now that's the only place that I'm living in basically right now, is where I have to ask for help with everything. And it was this forced slowdown where God said, man, Nick, and again, I'm not just interpreting the situations. There's a lot of time of prayer that I have spent on this and talking with him, trying to understand it, wrestling with it, because honestly, this has been really hard emotionally and spiritually for me. But I am so grateful for it, because I have now recognized this as an invitation to abide. Jesus is giving me the opportunity to recognize the places with food where I wasn't depending on him, and instead depend on him. In the same way, he's giving me the opportunities to recognize the places where, physically I wasn't counting on him. I was taking it for granted that I could get up out of bed and walk down the stairs easily with no problem, that I could lift up the kids and swing them around, that I could go outside and do yard work. Like I was taking all of these things for granted. Like, I'm a mid-30s guy. I should easily be able to do all this, and I'm going to do it. I was so dependent on myself, and now it's like I literally have to depend on him and those around me. What a beautiful example and representation of the invitation that God is giving through this, what we see like interaction that David is having in this psalm, but also through the invitation that you just shared with Zacchaeus, with Jesus, where he says, I'm coming to your house. Like there's this beautiful representation in my own life of God's invitation to abide and desire to abide. And really it comes down to, are we going to create that space? Are we willing to set aside our own self-sufficiencies and our own self-reliances and our own confidence in ourself to exchange that for a confidence in him and who he is? David was willing to do that. David set aside his own confidence. He was a king of a thriving kingdom with great military might. He had defeated a giant. He had defeated a lion and a bear. Like these are feats that most people could never say they had done or have done. He could say he did those things. And he set aside his confidence in himself and picked up a confidence in God and depended on him and desired to abide with him. And so this season that we find ourselves in now, where we have an opportunity to maybe intentionally, by choice, set some things aside, to fast them, to create space, to abide in a little bit more way, let's hear Jesus' invitation. He is saying, hey, I want to come to your house today. Or in the words of David, seek my face. Our response should be, your face, Lord, I will seek. So what might it look like this week for you to seek his face?
As you journey with us through this Lenten season, we recommend purchasing A Consuming Fire, a Lenten devotional, which is available for purchase on Amazon. Also, be sure to follow the Living Vertizontal podcast to stay current on all our new releases. To learn more about the Church at Riverstone, visit us at thechurchatriverstone.org.